Golem is absolutely busted. Tormented and Dariel behind me, level 200 and over 600 million damage. Floop, her HP was gone. One shot normal Ubers, no problem. And absolutely rampaging through the pit while maintaining a good amount of barrier. No worries, I'll exactly explain the rotation, how we changed and made the build better, and also the gear aspects paragons. Let's first explain the gameplay loop to really understand how to max the golem damage to then ploop, drop that super bomb on someone. Because it's a working together of your Shadow Blight key passive stacking, the Flesh Eater Paragon node for 5 corpse consumption and 40% damage multiplier, and then the Army of the Dead for the plus 100% or 200% damage. That's the triangle of Giga nuking. And the best way to achieve this is by looking at your skill bar as you're playing. If you engage enemies, you're going to start throwing in blights, corpse tendrils, curses to pull them together. And you'll see the Shadow Blight icon pop up in your bar. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10. And this goes faster than ever now because of a new aspect that we'll mention in the gear section. Now, as this stacks up, you get to also consume corpses with your minion summoning skill to get the Skeletal Priest. And there's going to be another icon in your skill bar that shows 1, 2 to 5. And if that reaches 5, it's 40% damage multiplier. If the Shadow Blight one reaches 10, it's the 240% damage multiplier if you have it on your two-handed weapon. These two together are already amazing. But if Shadow Blight reaches 10, you want to boom, pop Army of the Dead, and then gem that summoning button to really reach the optimum 5 straight away. And if you're then hitting your golem, that is the maximum amount of damage. And now this sounds a bit convoluted and complicated, but as you keep playing the build, you really get used to that rotation and just looking at the 2 indicators of the 5 and 10 to then just pull out the nuking skills. Your golem will anyways be spammed all the time, but as you then go for the bop 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 super nuke preparation, then you're going to keep jamming it even harder. Now, if you do wonder about the cooldown reduction that's happening so insane and my cooldowns are just vanishing, that has to do with our Book of the Dead. Skeletal Warriors is Reapers, and they have Reapers wind-up attacks now reduce one of your active cooldowns by 3 seconds. They do a wind-up attack every 10 seconds, and that will reduce anything. And then on top of your Decrepify cooldown reduction you're anyways having, adding that bonus just gets it super fast reduced. For the mages, we're playing the Shadow Mages to stack up our Shadow Blight even further, but we made our Warriors stack up Shadow Blight too at this point and the 15% damage multiplier. And before you ask, the Golem is the Blood Golem, and here's 2 things you can do. While you're pushing through the dungeon, you could technically go for the 30% damage absorption because the second part of his ability is not kicking in that hard versus multiple targets, because this 50% damage bonus is tripled versus bosses because bosses are single. If there's only one opponent, you do 3 times the damage with the golem, leading to the super hundreds, 200s, 500s of millions of damage. Whilst you're pushing through the dungeon, you'll never be finding a single opponent. So you could just have this activated, and then as you fight the pit boss, go for this second one. Topic of the pit, we did actually manage to reach tier 100 with this build. Has fallen, and you'll see some tier 90 gameplay in the background. First the skills, then the gear. Starting with Reap into Enhanced Reap, but we dropped this extremely early with the Blight into the Supernatural Blight for that 20% multiplicative damage increase. Then 3 ranks in Hoot Flesh to make your corpses, since that is actually your corpse production, together with a later Army of the Dead, which has volatile skeletons explode to make more corpses. These 2 are enough in corpse production. We're currently running 3 ranks in Spiked Armor for the Little Bit Thorns bonus damage, but also the 15% additional brings us nicely to the 9,232 without paying too much attention to our gear. We have 5 ranks in Skeletal Warrior Mastery at this point, with the full points in Fueled by Death and Grim Harvest into the movement speed. And technically for the pit, I would really argue that the movement speed can go out and you can get another 12% damage reduction, because the bonus movement speed in the pit is not as helpful as you would think it is, because you can walk away from anything anyways, or dash away from it. But yeah, these 12%, they don't matter at all. Death Embrace is definitely what I would highly recommend. If you're in the open world, keep the movement speed. Bonus damage here, bonus cooldown reduction, and 7 rings in Skeletal Mage Mastery, which is a nice goody good. Your Plague Corpse Tendrils are your only source of vulnerable at this point, and that's enough. 2 ranks in Necrotic Carapace. I don't need 3. 2 does exactly what I wanted to do. Then the Reaper's Pursuit with the Crippling Darkness. 3 ranks in Gloom and 3 ranks in Terror. That boosts the damage of my Shadow Mages. Then 6 ranks in Golem Mastery. So far, I'm trying to get up to 7 and 8 by masterworking my chest piece. 7 ranks in Hellbound Commander because we get a very, very good necklace. That means stand close to your minions. And lastly, the Shadow Blighted key passive to stack it up. No, you do not need Callan's Edict. That one is only needed in the beginning of the game, and then later you kick it out because you're reaching 100% attack speed on your minions without it. Now, a heads up and something to think about. The damages here are not as important as you would give it credit for. So there's a world where you might throw this out because this is only against stunned, immobilized, frozen, and chilled targets, which doesn't work against bosses. It's only good against normal enemies. These 3 points could be rather put into Decrepify, because more ranks into Decrepify is more damage reduction, which brings us from a measly 20% already up to 23%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but having 23, and now I'm going to yoink 1 point out here, and then in total having actually a 24% damage reduction, and now another 5 ranks from your helmet into Decrepify, brings this up to a very nice 27.3%. And that's another 7% damage reduction that makes you just safer and helps with survival in the pit. Now for the gear, you can see 24,000 life, and I'll tell you right now, for tier 100 of the pit, that is not enough. We can easily push this though, because I'm only having the 6% gems running. I think one single 9%. So we're already missing 12% max life just like that, which would push us even higher. But we already had to change our complete Paragon board, they'll talk about in a second, to accommodate for more life. 35 to 40,000 is minimum with potions to really ensure your survival in the pit. For the weapon, we're running Blighted. That is the 240% multiplier. And we're finally running Blighted because we managed to get our Blight aspect to proc way more with a new aspect on the gloves. Covering that. Golem damage, minion attack speed, mandatory. Now we do have critical strike damage intelligence on it. The intelligence could also be maximum life. Then we have plus 81 life on hit, and that is necessary at this point because life on hit works together with temerity, and temerity gives us a barrier on overhealing. So if our skeletal priest heals us, we overheal and we get a barrier up to 80% of our max life. If we have 35,000 life, we have 30,000 barrier. Oh, and life on hit accounts for everything. Damage over time, Army of the Dead, Corpse Tendrils, if you're hitting with your golem, so if you're using his ability, everything is essentially life on hit for temerity. Now, how do we manage Shadow to go crazy? And that's thank you to a YouTube comment. Skeletal Priest empower your warriors to deal shadow damage and have a chance to stun enemies. That is an insane level of stun for staggering the bosses, but it also makes your Shadow Blight key passive just instant pop. What you want on the gloves is Skeletal Mage Mastery, critical strike damage, and critical strike chance, because we want to reach at least 50% critical strike chance for more damage on our minions. Golem damage and Corpse Tendril size, mandatory. On the boots, it's essence per second, Warrior Mastery, Intelligence, or Max Life. Then movement speed and Corpse Tendril size, and like this, we have Corpse Tendril size 100% knocked out of the window. Because now in our chest, we're actually going for barrier generation, that our barrier that we're generating generates harder. You need Golem Mastery on it, and I'm lucky to have a Masterworked one, the rest is shit on this. And then you can temper for maximum life or armor, whatever you do need, plus Skeletal Warriors and Mages on the chest. The helmet is getting essence per second as well, so you can just soak up your essence very easy. Armor and maximum life, cooldown reduction would probably be better here than the maximum life, barrier generation, and then maximum life as well. Might temper for armor if you do need it. The aspect is the damage reduction for you and your minions, because that 25% is way too good and way too free. The amulet is running Frenzied, and that is 68%. With the tempering on our weapon and the Paragon board, we're exactly at 103 or 2% minion attack speed. Perfection. Ranks to Hellbound Commander, critical strike chance, max life, and I have ultimate cooldown reduction or golem skill cooldown reduction and golem damage. The ranks to Hellbound Commander are amazing, but at the same time, you really need to stand close to your minions. Works with the bosses though, because you're just gonna push into their booty. Why am I not 12 out of 12 masterworking it? Because it costs 10 million gold and I don't have that. Well, I do have that, but then I'm piss poor. Rings, critical strike chance, critical strike damage, and max life. Ultimate cooldown reduction or Golem cooldown reduction damage, and then Army of the Dead with a plus 100% damage. That went away from our weapon because we're now able to trigger that Shadow Blight way more often, as you can see in the gameplay with a tiny Shadow Blight icon in the skill bar. Lastly, the second ring, which should have the exact same stacks as the first ring, and then your minions have increased 40x multiplicative damage. Works perfect. There's an argument that the aspect of reanimation should be put on the weapon because it's a permanent increase of the damage. On the other hand, the Shadow Blight key passive with the 240% is just such a nice nuke when you're then triggering your Golem to really go for these super outlandish killer crits. Now, Paragon Board was super tricky to figure out, but we made it. And the one thing that was important is a mindset shift, because we went from maximum damage to maximum survival, really going for all the maximum life nodes we can find everywhere. Since, as I said, you want to have with the potions, and there's actually 2 potions you can take, Fortitude and the Quest Elixir, come up to roughly 40,000 life. Right now I'm at 35,000 because I'm missing some masterworks and some max life rolls, especially in good where I would like to have them. Here, for example, I would like to have a max life roll instead of intelligence roll. But I have to have a max life roll instead of intelligence roll here as well. Yes, int is not as important as being able to survive, but 35,000 to 40k is really what you need to stay alive. For this, we're first putting in the darkness glyph. That is damage reduction from enemies affected by shadow. Really good. And we then take the most maximum life we can. Sadly, we don't have the points for this, but the first Paragon board we go through is the Bone Graft one, which is plenty weird, and that is to activate this rare node, Tenacity, for the 4% maximum life. One interesting thing, if you do notice that you struggle to activate stat-wise the Golem node, that you're not having enough willpower, you could swap the Golem board and the Bone Graft board around. First now, Corporal Glyph, to boost the elemental resistance, that we get more elemental resistance, and then we pick up the rare node Tenacity. That is another 8% more life. 2. The amount of 14% bonus life is crazy. Into the Cult Leader board with the Death Razor Glyph for bonus damage and damage reduction to our minions and bonus damage, and most important, the attack speed to get up to that 100%. And in the Golem board, we're simply activating Territorial. And while you're going through everything, make sure that you always pick up dexterity and willpower over intelligence, because you have enough intelligence anyways. Now, the next one we just zoop through is the Bloodbath board, where we go for the Essence Glyph for that 22% damage multiplier. And technically, I would want more dexterity, but we have 39 out of 25 activated. That's very good. Flying through the Flash Eater board for that 40% multiplier. And yes, we don't have the points for the damage to elites. I know, very sad. And technically, you do want this attack speed here too. This is very important. This attack speed node needs to be taken in the very beginning, as you don't have the Send of Death board yet while you're leveling up, because that brings you to the 100% attack speed. Because it will be 5 points plus 31% from your gear with the Paragon points and the tempering, plus then the 68% from the frenzied aspect. Now, here's the thing. If you temper this correctly, because my temper is a complete low roll, you do not need those 5 points. Because you see we're at 30.7. If we're at 32%, and 32% would simply be another 1.3% higher roll on this. Easy. With a little bit of masterwork and the tempering, you can essentially forego the Paragon points, which makes your life easier to reach that 100% attack speed cap for Cult Leader. Then you can shirk those Paragon points to move into Send of Death, and then we're getting the Golem Glyph with 42 points activated. There's technically even more, but that is a huge amount of damage bonus. Now, this is where we could also cut into for more survivability. So you could take 3 points out or 2 points out to maybe get yourself the rare node, or to put some more points into total armor while Golem is active, or the 2% nodes down here to just move your maximum life up a bit more. We do have actually 1 point left over that I like to put into the total armor as well. But yeah, it was a bit tricky. You really do need the survival though. Ladies and gentlemen, how deep are you in the pit already? How's the Necromancer going for you? If you're still leveling, this build actually explains you the level journey very well, while the lower video gives you some general tips on how to progress through Season 4 smoother and easier. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.